Living in a fair society requires what people would call social justice, which implies that people are treated reasonably equally and get the same kinds of opportunities. In fact, the degree of social justice has been linked to how long we live and the rates of heart disease and cancer. It used to be thought that if we do have an innate sense of fairness, it resides in the front part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex. But new research is showing that decision-making about social justice is a two-part process occurring in different areas of the brain, the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala, and that our human sense of equity may be hardwired into this ancient part of the brain.
So the amygdala, it's the most primitive structure in the brain, and it just senses if something is good or bad, and then it reacts to it in a second. It's a little bit tit for tat. If someone hits you, you hit them back, and there is no thought to it, while the prefrontal cortex considers like, okay, I got hitten, but maybe I don't want to hit this person back because it will have consequences. The prefrontal cortex and the executive functions, they're slower in their way of computing, and they also have like a representation of the future. It compares things that we have done before to the present and also what we want to do. It's a much more complicated computation that is also a little bit model-based because it compares present things with previous things and such.
So what did your research show?
We showed that this is something that's very fundamental in us as beings to implement justice around us. We actually have a built-in system that makes us react to this, and it's a prerequisite in order to be able to be with other beings in a social group.
So while they were playing social justice games, making decisions about fairness, you were looking at their brains using a functional MRI scanner.
In the study, we let some subjects play this economic game called the ultimatum game. And the ultimatum game is about that there is a proposer offering a monetary proposal. So it can be, for example, that I have 100 kroners and I offer you 20 and I take 80.
You get 20 kroners, I take 80 kroners.
And in that case, you can choose either to say yes or no. And if you say yes, it means that the split will be realized. But if you say no, neither of us will get any money, which means that if you don't like my proposal, you can punish me by saying no, but then the consequence for you will be that you will have no money. But at the same time, you have told me that I've done something wrong. By doing so, you can implement justice. So the next time I meet you, I know that if I'm not treating you fairly, you will reject my offer, and then neither of us will have something.
And what did you find?
We found that this primitive structure, amygdala, was involved in unfairness and also to reject these unfair offers. So when people actually said, no, I don't accept your offer, amygdala was lightened up. We saw some activity in the frontal parts as well, but what was unique with our study was the timing, because previous studies, they had waited for 4 seconds before they actually looked into the brain, what was happening. But we timed our event to the last word of the sentence. So when I had said, and I take 80, then we just said, okay, what's happening here? And then we saw amygdala, because one thing that's very unique with amygdala is that it reacts very fast. The response goes up and then it goes down rather quickly. And if you wait 4 seconds and try to see, oh, what happened here, you will probably not find any amygdala response.
So the research showed that humans have an old and very basic sense of social justice when they're being dealt with unfairly. But what's fascinating is that it showed that this sense of injustice extends to when we see other people being dealt with unfairly, and it varies between different cultures.
There are differences between cultures, but I would say that the Western countries are actually acting pretty much in a similar way. So the Western countries, they prefer this 50-50 splits, and they also expect the proposer to make these kinds of proposals. But if you go to Peru, for example, there are some people there that are very rational in this sense, and they accept any monetary offer because they would rather have 20 kroners than 0. But if you go to Papua New Guinea, then it's the opposite, because there it's the culture to give hyperfare offers. So then it can be that they give you 80 kroners and they just take 20 for themselves, because it's a way of showing status that I have a lot and I want to share. Which also gives hope, because it means that by our cultural setting we can make people more generous.
You also studied Valium-like anti-anxiety drugs for their effect on the acceptance of inequity.
We gave a drug called oxazepam, which is an anxiolytic drug, which means that you become less anxious when you get it. So in society it's used as an anxiety treatment, and people can also use similar drugs if they have sleeping problems or such, but it's a commonly used drug. And the goal with the amygdala activity, because the way this drug works is by inhibiting brain activity, basically. So we thought that if the amygdala response is responsible for this feeling of unfairness and also rejection and implementing fairness, if we give a drug that pushes this activity down, can we change behavior so people accept unfairness? And that's actually what we saw. That people who got this anxiolytic drug, they didn't activate their amygdala as much as the people who just got the sugar pill. They also accepted unfairness to a greater extent than the people who got the sugar pill.
So the message here is that we react much more instantly than people have previously thought. So you might want to hang on for about 4 seconds till your prefrontal cortex kicks in before you decide whether something's fair or not. And if the findings are right about anti-anxiety medications, it shows how easily our judgment about fairness might be affected. Maybe governments should hand them out about election time.